That is what you're doing. Mr. Orban, you are not a patriot. You are just a useful idiot of Russia and China. That's the reality. You robbed your population and enriched your family and friends. Hungary has become one of the poorest and officially the most corrupt country in the EU.
Thank you.
In a room overflowing with EU lawmakers, Friedrich Merz stepped forward and launched a fiery assault on Hungary that stunned the chamber into breathless silence. He demanded funds be cut, veto power removed, and made it unmistakably clear his words were aimed directly at Viktor Orban. And in response, Orban rose slowly, locked eyes with Merz in a stare that needed no translation, and walked out without a word. A rebellion in silence, a message that Hungary refuses to bow to a system it believes is broken.
What a fraud! What a burden for your people. Mr. Orban, please step down to make Hungary great again.
Friedrich Merz didn't just speak. He attacked Hungary's position inside the EU head-on. He called for EU funds to be blocked, Hungary's veto to be neutralized, and essentially asked Parliament to strip Orban of the only leverage a smaller state has inside a union dominated by bigger economies.
Orban, we want our money back. And to all of us, we have to stop this deal. No more EU funds for Hungary. Let's take his veto away.
You don't debate someone who wants to remove your voice. You leave them speaking to an empty chair. And whether you support him or oppose him, the move exposed something Brussels avoids discussing openly. Hungary is no longer afraid of consequences. This is why Orban left.
And you brag about your majorities in the Hungarian parliament. Yet since years, you only rule by emergency decree. Are you so afraid of...
For the Commission, that moment was dangerous. One member state publicly rejected pressure instead of absorbing it. And it worked. No sanctions followed that moment, no forced apology, no policy reversal. Silence outranked authority.
Prime Minister Viktor Orban's surprise trip to Moscow. A visit carried out without a European mandate and without coordination with EU partners.
The real sting is this: EU unity depends on compliance, not force. If a prime minister can depart mid-attack and keep his power intact, it exposes a weakness the institution does not want publicly visible. Control only works when members cooperate. Orban demonstrated he doesn't have to.
But the money is being frozen by the European Commission due to concerns around corruption and violations of EU rule of law.
Because underneath the speeches, behind all the moral language and legal dressing, this fight is about one thing: money. Over 6 to 6.5 billion euros in EU cohesion funds remain frozen due to rule of law disputes, and analysts say up to 20 billion euros overall sits under conditional review. When Merz said, "No more EU funds for Hungary," he wasn't theorizing. The financial knife is already on the table.
Brussels thinks that the 17 measures proposed by Hungary to tackle corruption are insufficient, and Budapest must do more if the money to be released. And the European Parliament agrees.
Brussels uses money as leverage. Hungary uses the veto as a counterweight, a shield against decisions pushed by larger states. When mayors demanded funding cuts and veto removal, it wasn't policy debate. It was an attempt to break that balance. That is why his words exploded like a political warhead across the chamber. Because here's the line nobody likes to cross openly. If Hungary can lose funds but remain bound to EU decisions, then this stops being a union of equals and becomes a hierarchy with Germany at the top. In that moment, Orban's silent exit exposed the architecture the institution never admits exists.
Mr. Orban, you're the most corrupt politician in the European Union. You and your cronies, you stole money on an insane scale. At least 14 billion euros that went to your country during your premiership have been lost.
The EU runs on transaction, not sentiment. Influence is purchased through compliance, alignment, and silence. Strip one side of bargaining power and the entire exchange collapses. That is the real fault line. Not speeches, not personality clashes, but power distribution.
I have been in Hungarian internal politics for many years, but every opposition party in the past 30 years would have asked themselves to bring down the news that
Orban's departure didn't just shake European leadership, it carved a dividing line straight through the continent. In Western Europe, the move was labeled arrogant, undemocratic, even childish. But in Eastern Europe, that same moment was replayed as victory, a leader refusing to bow his head to countries richer, older, and louder than his own. The walkout became more than political theater. It became a mirror showing two Europes staring at each other across a cracked floor.
The trick you have played is that you distract people from your heist with hate against minorities, with propaganda about gender, with so-called peace initiatives, but this money was meant to fix roads.
For decades, the EU functioned like a pyramid. France and Germany at the top shaping policy, while newer members were expected to adapt, adjust, absorb. Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, Romania, they joined a union but often felt like guests in someone else's house. Orban's exit shifted that dynamic for the first time on camera. He said nothing, yet communicated everything. Hungary will no longer sit quietly at a table where decisions arrive pre-written.
Because they feel that this is not right. This is a shameful thing. And here we are faced with the fact that they say it in our faces, that they are not only doing this.
This matters because unity is not something you declare, it is something you sustain. And in that moment, Europe looked less like a union and more like a marriage where one partner silently packed a suitcase mid-argument. The East saw resistance, the West saw disrespect, the rest of the world saw vulnerability, and if one country can get up and leave without consequence, you can be certain others watched closely and asked themselves a dangerous question. If Hungary can refuse pressure and survive, why can't we?
This dispute casts a shadow over the Hungarian economy and public finances. As soon as this dispute is settled, it will suddenly give room for movement on the budget.
The EU operates on a simple exchange. Brussels gives money, members give alignment, but Hungary is the first country to publicly disrupt that formula. Billions in EU funds are suspended under Article 7 and rule of law conditionality, yet Orban still holds a veto powerful enough to freeze entire defense packages and sanction decisions. Money is the Commission's leverage, veto is Budapest's shield, and neither side blinked. This is the first time in years the EU looked like an institution that requires cooperation to function rather than one that commands obedience. A union built on unanimity is impressive on paper, but extremely fragile in real conflict. One leader can jam the entire machine, and Orban just proved it. Not by shouting, by leaving and letting the machine spin with no operator.
Who has ever stolen over 10,000 money transporters worth of EU funds? And the biggest trick you have played is that you distract people from your heist.
Anxiety in Europe isn't born from speeches. It's born from what Hungary just proved. A single nation stood under pressure, refused to bend, and the EU's core assumption cracked. Unity exists only as long as members choose it. Orban's silent walkout did more damage than any debate ever could because it exposed the limit of Brussels' power. The EU can negotiate, but it cannot command sovereign states, not without their consent. And beneath the surface lies the real trigger: Ukraine. This clash isn't just about money or veto rights, it's about who controls Europe's future in war. Berlin wants alignment with NATO. Orban demands sovereign choice. When mayors called to strip Hungary's veto, he wasn't talking budgets, he was talking authority over war.
If we would integrate Ukraine into the European Union, we would integrate the war. And we would not like to be together in one community with a country who is in war and represent an imminent danger on us.
This is where theory becomes reality. Hungary refuses to support sanctions like Germany expects, refuses fast-track EU entry for Kiev, refuses to treat NATO policy as automatic obligation, and whether you agree with Orban or not, he is forcing Europe to confront a truth it never wanted televised. Security is not unanimous. If one country says no to escalation, the system freezes. If one country refuses alignment, NATO strategy cracks. European leaders talk unity, but defense isn't philosophy, it's math. 26 nations aligned means little if the 27th holds the brake. That's what Merz was really swinging at, and that's what Orban refused to surrender.
You say you are for national sovereignty, yet you invite Chinese policemen to surveil the people in your country. You say you want to stop migration, yet you let Russian spies into our Schengen system and call it national card.
And migration is one of the core pressure points behind this clash. Germany has struggled with inflow, integration, and public frustration for years. Hungary didn't debate, it built a border, enforced it, and uses results as proof of sovereignty in action. That contrast alone makes every criticism from Berlin sound weaker to voters who see Budapest doing what Berlin couldn't. This is where Merz's attack turns risky. Every time he challenges Orban, German audiences are reminded that Hungary kept control while Germany didn't. The IFD capitalizes on that comparison instantly. Clips of the walkout circulate with one message: Hungary protects borders. Germany argues about them. Orban doesn't need to campaign in Germany. Migration policy has already done that job for him.
All funds going to Hungary need to be frozen because all EU funds are at risk of being stolen. They're not just stealing agricultural funds, they're not just stealing.
The hard reality is simple. Criticizing Hungary may rally Brussels, but it strengthens opposition at home. AfD uses Orban as evidence that sovereignty is a choice. One Germany refused. Merz tried to isolate Orban and instead elevated him into a reference point for German dissent. Orban's departure didn't stay inside the chamber. It spilled straight into German politics and handed the AfD a real-world showcase. They can now point to Hungary and say, sovereignty isn't theory, it works. One leader refused pressure, kept money, kept veto power, and didn't break. For voters tired of EU centralization, that image hits harder than any speech from Merz or Berlin.
For example, there is this ominous thing that they do not want to give the money to the Hungarians. I have already fought for half of it.
While the Commission debates values, Budapest signs security deals with Beijing, even allowing Chinese police to operate inside Hungary, something critics say invites surveillance from a foreign government right into EU territory. At the same time, Hungary offers 10-year residency to foreign investors, including Russians and Belarusians, while the rest of Europe enforces sanctions.
Party members do this. It is a shameful thing. And now we hear it with our own ears, we see it with our own eyes, that they are not ashamed that they are working against their own country, but they are proud of it, and this is their goal. They are even happy that things are going badly.
Ursula von der Leyen warned publicly that these choices make Hungary a security liability inside the Union. And as tensions grow, leaks reveal something even more disruptive. Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia exploring a parallel cooperation model, a Europe within Europe. A fallback structure if unity breaks. If that idea materializes, the center loses control overnight. So don't leave here like Brussels left Orban's chair empty. Hit like, share this video, and subscribe right now.